Welcome to episode 22 of Expert Speaking Made Simple. We're your hosts, Debra Searle
and Hayley Barnard.
And today we've got a cracking interview for you. Now, you could not meet a nicer young man than Alex Staniforth, who is just going to have such a bright future as a speaker and, of course, as an adventurer, as you'll hear. He has already been to the Himalayas 4 times, I think now, even though he's only 22 years old. He's done 2 summit attempts on Everest, which ended in quite dramatic circumstances, which he explains in this interview, and of course gives him a phenomenal story to relay his brilliant speaking on how to just deal with adversity and challenge. And he also spoke really honestly about how he's had to do that anyway in his private life, which I won't give away. But it was a great interview, wasn't it, Hayley?
It really was. And a couple of things I think are useful for listeners. One is for those adventurers out there who are interested in funding their future adventures through speaking, which is something he's doing very successfully. And secondly, his story of going from being a speaker at schools and now dipping his toe into the corporate market, and how he's found that, and how he's used a mentor and coach to help him, particularly with the fees side, coming to terms with the increase in fees and how he feels about that. So all of that was really useful insights, which hopefully will be useful to some of our listeners.
Yes, and he's really funded his most recent expedition, which was where he was the fastest person to climb all 100 UK county tops in the UK in 72 days by foot, bike and kayak, really through speaking. So it really is possible to do that if any of you out there are adventurers listening to this. So without further ado, here's Alex.
So Alex, welcome to the show.
Hi there, Deborah, and thank you for having me along.
You're welcome. So it's we've got myself and Hayley on the line with Alex, and it's really great actually to have you on board, Alex, because I was not much older than you when I started my speaking career. And what age are you at now?
22 now at the moment, yeah.
Yeah, which is fantastic, because it is, I think it's probably a bit tougher to get on the speaking circuit as a youngster. Have you found that challenging, being a younger speaker?
In some ways, it's been a big advantage, I think, because there aren't many speakers our age, and it gives you something fresh. It kind of helps you be more, I guess it helps you stand out compared to most corporate speakers, for example, which are a lot older, have a lot more experience, and particularly with speaking in schools, young people can relate so much better to somebody who's walked the walk, who's been in a similar place to them, and that's why I think I have a lot of demand for schools. But equally, in the corporate environments, I find that a lot of the people in the audience will often see their kids in me because of the age, and in some ways they can kind of relate to it in a different level again. So I think my age often brings a surprise to people. People say I've achieved quite a lot, in quite a short time, and in some ways actually it's worked out well. And I guess something I need to think about is how I can continue to grow my speaking career as I get older and as I kind of become more of kind of in the crowd, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I felt the same. In fact, at the time when I started out in my 20s, I didn't even really register that I was kind of that much younger, than that it was different to be that young as a speaker. And I think a lot of it is, and you have this too, is that when you have the inner confidence to stand on stage and speak, then that comes across to an audience as authentic, and and there's something powerful in that. So it's great that you've got that at your age. But let's take us back a step. Who are you, I suppose, and what is it you do that makes you have this opportunity to stand on stage and speak to people?
It's certainly, let's say it was never planned. I mean, I'm very fortunate to do what I do now, and I guess my journey, my story is about inspiring people to overcome their challenges through my challenges. And it's a pretty unlikely start, really, for me. Started school with quite a few challenges, quite a bit of adversity of my own. I've had a stammer since I've been able to speak, which is what people find bizarre, especially when I speak for a living. And I had epilepsy as a child, was badly bullied, mental health problems. That's kind of gone on through the whole life, really. And so these things gave me no confidence, no self-esteem. And that was by chance kind of how I came across the outdoors. And the outdoors became my escape. It became my way to really discover my limits, to achieve my potential and just discover what I was capable of achieving, and a real passion for being able to use my experiences to help other people change their mindsets. For such a long time was stuck in this kind of victim mindset, and the outdoors, became that vehicle, and it's just kind of gone from there. The speaking was certainly never planned, but again, it's another way for me to overcome my own limits, to overcome my stammer, to sort of stand up and say, I have my challenges, they don't have me.
Fantastic.
And so since then, I've obviously been on various expeditions, various challenges, Everest attempts twice. And I think specifically by doing something of that scale really opened up a lot of doors for me, because there are so many speakers, and I think trying to stand out has been a challenge. But I think I've got to where I am by finding a passion, and just following that at any cost, really.
Yeah, because these things are not cheap. How did you fund your Everest expeditions?
Well, my first attempt was 2014, and then my second was 2015. The first one was stopped by the earthquake, the avalanche that took 16 lives, sadly, whilst we were at base camp. The following year was when the earthquake hit Nepal, and we were trapped in the mountain for 2 days. So these were both funded by corporate sponsorship, basically. So I've kind of come from a pretty average background. I'm just an ordinary person trying to achieve extraordinary things, and it was all funded by a lot of fundraising, a lot of time sending emails whilst washing pots in the local pub, starting the usual way. And so I'm really fortunate now that speaking plays a really big part in my career, and that's helped me to fund the challenges that I've done since.
Fantastic. And it's something I always say to adventurers, because I've been a professional adventurer for, I suppose the best part of 17 years now, that the question I get asked the most from other adventurers is, how do I get sponsorship? And actually, I think the route you're now on is a really lovely one, in that it's hard to get sponsorship, as we all know, but to be able to fund some of your expeditions through your speaking work is a fantastic way to do it, and a lot less pressure, because you haven't got to adhere to sponsors' demands, and so now that you're getting established as a speaker, do you hope to do more expeditions in the future?
Of course, because I think it all works nicely together. I essentially have to do the adventures to be able to have content, to have a story, to actually share in the first place. Although, of course, that's not just why I do it. The adventures are so much more. They're not only about a personal drive, but also using those challenges that I do to inspire people directly, and also fundraise for causes. I mean, my challenges have now raised over 85,000 for a variety of causes. And of course, after the expeditions, that's when I have an opportunity to talk about that challenge. And I really love being able to share those experiences of being at breaking point, and being able to put mind over matter. And so my most recent challenge was Climb the UK, which is last summer, 72-day journey, running, cycling, even kayaking, to the highest point of every county in the UK.
Fantastic.
And that was probably my biggest challenge to date, actually. I felt that by doing something close to home, I can engage more people. And I actually managed to fit 5 talks into my itinerary. So I was literally kayaking over to the Isle of Wight, for example, turning up at a primary school, speaking to 100 kids, then biking off, and often literally turning up at schools on the bike, soaking wet, speaking to 200 students and cycling off, which is quite nice for me. But absolutely, it's grown and grown. And I think that the more challenges I do, the more of a story I will have to share. And I really hope that I can keep on doing this, keep on inspiring people for as long as possible.
That's brilliant.
That's fantastic, Alex. So you've mentioned schools. How much of your work would you say is schools? How many, give us an idea of maybe how many schools a year you might speak at? I know obviously being away on expedition changes that slightly. What about the private sector? Do you do lots of companies, or the public sector? Do you ever do anything, NHS or that sort of thing? Where's your speaking work coming from?
It's It's a massive myth. It's a huge mix. I mean, my first ever talk was at a primary school, which was in 2012. Now, that was the year I carried the Olympic torch, and because of my stammer, for a long time, I would have been too afraid to even speak in class. I mean, there was many times when I've literally hidden in the toilets at school because I'd be so scared of speaking in class, and I've smashed up phones in my house for the frustration of being unable to speak, and so that was kind of a daily challenge. And so to actually speak in public for me was never. It was just like unimaginable. It was my worst nightmare. But what I found is actually speaking in public is a lot easier. In fact, I find it quite simple compared to speaking on the phone or just to one person. And it was after that first talk at a primary school that I just realised I had this ability to speak to large audiences. And so now I'd say it's gone on from there to about half my work is probably corporate. Usually staff development type things. I've done some larger conferences. My biggest audience is around probably 500 people, and I worked out the other day that I've spoken to probably over 8,500 people in 3 years, which I think at my age isn't a bad start. But in the schools, I mean, generally, I understand schools don't have as much of a budget. I've got to the point now that I kind of can't talk, that now all my talks are paid just because I have, so much on. But I do a variety of primary schools, high schools, lots of sort of special events and awards. For example, this Thursday, I've got an awards event at a high school who've booked me about 5 times now, which is quite nice. But some of my corporate work has been for pretty large kind of blue chip companies, which is at my age is very unusual, but very kind of fortunate to have that actually. So it's a huge mix. It really is. And I mean, more recently, I was actually in Nepal and I spoke in a high school there. Now I can't speak Nepali. I was honestly worried whether the kids would understand the word I said, but that was fantastic. And what's exciting about speaking, as you know, is that there's such a variety. We never know. Every event is different.
That's fantastic. And do you are you actively trying to sort of market yourselves to corporates and schools, or does it all tend to happen for you now by word of mouth?
I've actually done barely any marketing at all. And I said, when I started off, when I did that very first talk, which I'd absolutely scared the living daylights out of me, it was never planned. It just kind of went from there. And basically, I'd say now probably 75% of my work comes from kind of word of mouth or repeat business. A lot of the schools, for example, they have the same events every year. They have different students coming through the process. And one of my corporate clients, they've just done a series of programs, and basically they booked me for 5 more this year because the feedback was so good. They found it was such a unique thing that they've not had before, that the staff hadn't seen before, that they just want it again.
And what is it you think that is unique about you? Because that's actually you're getting a phenomenal rate there of repeat business. So what's the unique thing, do you think, Alex?
I don't know. I mean, I just do what I do, and I still find it bizarre that I'm invited to speak and that I'm handing out awards to students who are probably my age, if not just kind of slightly younger. It's like, what have I done to deserve that privilege? But I think with the corporate clients, what I found is that they just don't expect it, because I even had some feedback at it was a leadership program that I was part of recently, and one of the team genuinely thought I was there to fix the projector, because they walk in the room and there's a young man in a suit, and they kind of assumed at first I was some kind of entrepreneur, and that's the thing, people don't really expect somebody so young to have kind of been to Everest, to have been like in the Himalayas 5 times, and I think it just completely gives them something they've not heard before. And I think just for the same reason, for the schools, for education, and again, I have spoken for things like the NHS, I've spoken for charities and various things, is that it's giving young people somebody they can relate to. I think they're more receptive to somebody of their own age who can talk to them. You can connect with the issues that they're facing. I think that's something that isn't actually that common.
Absolutely, and I think you've also plugged into a topic that's been popular, I would say, on the speaking circuit for maybe the last year or two, which is this whole interest in mental health for employees. And there's been much more openness about talking about mental health. And I think one of the things that comes across to me, Alex, about your website and the way you present yourself and just the way you are generally is that you're very open and transparent, and it's very authentic. And I think it's that authenticity that appeals to people, and it's really breaking down barriers, I would imagine, in the places that you're speaking.
Yeah, hopefully, and I would agree that I just try to be, I just try to be authentic and just try to be who I am, because I think if you don't believe in what you're saying, then people can see straight through that. And I need to feel comfortable in what I'm saying and just be human. And mental health, that's something that's affected me for kind of 5-6 years now. It goes back to when I was a child in school suffering anxiety, and it's still something that I have to manage on a daily basis. And as you mentioned, it's a growing problem in workplaces, schools. It's an epidemic. And I think what I found is, like with my stammer, people have a lot of respect for you being able to be open, just to say it how it is. And it can be quite emotional to actually do that, to actually put it out there, and it shocks people. But I think to be able to almost connect with them in that way, you have to really wear your heart on your sleeve. And I'm very comfortable doing that, because it's me, it's who I am, and I know that going to that level is what really inspires people.
Absolutely.
Alex,
so how did you... Go ahead, Debra, sorry.
No, I think I'm sure you've probably got a much better question than me. You go for it.
Well, I'm just interested to know, because I think a lot of speakers go on this journey that you've been on, where you get asked to maybe speak once or twice, and you realise that you're good at it and you like it and you connect with your audience, but and you start getting this word of mouth referral. But there comes this tricky point where you need to start asking for money. Now, how did you make that transition from being someone who spoke for free to getting paid to speak?
It's still kind of bizarre to me, and I'm incredibly lucky that I can do this. I really am, and I think it wasn't particularly planned. I think if I think back, because there's so many events that I have to really think hard about this, but I think what really changed it was after the original first talk I did at my old school. Once I realized I could do it, I kind of wanted to find what I could overcome next, and so I then started contacting other schools myself to offer myself as a speaker. I didn't really do a great deal of it after then, but then it was before my Everest trip. I was invited to speak at the Chester Business Club. Now, this was literally about a month before the trip, and I'd been coached by, a brigadier, John Thompson, who was part of the club, and he taught me so much about speaking that a lot of that now I still use every single time. And basically, with getting that talk, in return for me doing that, I had quite a large contribution towards my charity and towards my exhibition fees. So it's almost like I had no choice but to do this massive talk that scared the life out of me. And again, that fee now is it was the sort of amount that I would now normally charge for a talk, but that's only at this point after 3 years of experience and reputation. And at the time, John, he coached me and taught me everything I needed to do to get it up to standard for a club of that level. Their past speakers were, kind of prime ministers, Ranulph Fiennes, people of that ilk. And I had a standing ovation. It was one of the most memorable talks I've probably ever given. And it was that moment, really. I mean, when you've been paid that much for something, and I know obviously corporates work in the way that they want to kind of spend a minimum amount because they want to get that level of, they want to get that level of standard. But I think after then it changes, the mindset. You're offering a service, you're delivering something that benefits people. Why shouldn't you, charge for it? Because time is valuable. This is my living. If I wasn't making money off speaking on my ambassador roles, then I wouldn't be able to have the freedom to do what I do. So I think from that point, I charged for all my talks. I did do quite a few for free, normally kind of charity events where they didn't have a budget, but those were useful in terms of experience in practicing skills. But as I've, hopefully achieved more and more as I've got more experience, I've just naturally increased my fees. And I guess in a nutshell, it was by chance. But once you've been paid for one, you just treat everyone the same. You're offering a service. Why not?
Absolutely. I think you're right. It's a mindset shift, isn't it? Once you've made this mindset shift that you are a professional speaker, then it becomes a lot more comfortable, I think, to say, right, this is how much to charge.
Yeah, and it's still difficult. I think every speaker has this battle as to how much they're worth and how much they charge, and I guess some of us feel uncomfortable. We think, how can I be worth that much? But you have to get advice. You have to compare yourself to people who are offering a similar thing, and to be able to change a life. And I mean, some of the feedback I've had has proven that I think is invaluable anyway. And you think of how much they may spend to change a life, it seems kind of small, really.
Absolutely. Now, if any of the listeners at the moment are thinking, well, how much do speakers make? If you want to head back to a previous podcast, we actually did a whole episode on how much do speakers make. And you just need to go to yourspeakingcareer.com/004. And if you listen in there, we break it down and explain how fees tend to be structured in the speaking world. So that might be helpful for some of you out there who are just wondering, how much are we really talking about here? So a question from me. What would be your top tips you'd give to anyone else who's trying to grow a speaking career at the moment?
Oh, I mean, I could say so much because I've been very fortunate, that I've had a variety of mentors who have really taught me an awful lot, and I still work with those. I was very lucky to come across them.
Were they family, friends? Were they? I mean, how did you find those people?
So my first kind of proper speaking coach was John Thompson at the Business Club, and it was basically I came across the Business Club by chance when I was looking for Everest sponsorship, and it was when that was when he said, well, actually, how about you come and speak for us, and we will kind of sponsor you in terms of paying you for the talk, and that was when they put me in touch with him, and so that was, again, by chance and good fortune. And I think with sponsorship, you build a network, and that network has brought me other people as well. I mean, I have recently paid for coaching as well. But I think really it's about like any fundraising. It's not what you know, it's who you know. And again, by fundraising, I've been fortunate to come across people, and the conversation has been had, and they've ended up giving me advice and coaching. And every talk I do, I mean, I always ask for feedback, and my mentors have been there to kind of say what worked well, what I could do. My general tips really would be, if you haven't got a good mentor or a coach, just get as much feedback as you possibly can, and especially if you have the funds to do so. Investing in speaking coaching, I think, is a very, very good investment. I mean, I did that last year for the first time, and it's things like fine-tuning message and the precision of the voice, and just the general delivery skills. There were so many things that I was doing wrong, and it was only when I filmed myself and we went through it that I was mortified. But you have to take it with it. But you have to bite your lip, and as a result, that really sharpened my whole kind of presentation skills. And I really think that actually that investment has earned me more money. So definitely a tip would be to have a good mentor, or to have some sort of coaching.
And how did you find your coach?
Well, the paid coaching was again, that was through recommendations on LinkedIn. There are so many good ones out there. Priscilla and Craig, I came across them. Well, Priscilla through LinkedIn, and Craig was through a TEDx event that I helped out at. And again, it's just networking really, but there are a lot of good options out there. With John and my mentors, again, it's kind of come through sponsorship. It's come not by looking for a speaking coach, but obviously with their background, and John had spoken a lot in the military. There was a lot I could learn from him. Another tip that I would give is just to, it goes back to your early point about kind of shocking the audience. Just putting it out there. People might be quite surprised if you just blurt out about a very, very low moment you've had, but that's when the room goes silent, and I find that's when you really get people hanging on every word. Is to, I think, I wouldn't say not be afraid to be yourself, but don't be afraid to be, be open, be honest, and just say it how it is sometimes. I think in speaking with stammers, with mental health, with everything, I think that's really what endears people towards you.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a move. I think it's been helped a lot by the speaker Brené Brown, whose TED talk on the power of vulnerability has fueled a conversation about people sharing more on stage perhaps than they would have in the past, and being able to be a little bit more emotional and vulnerable. And you're right, it is when the room goes silent, when people hang on your every word. In fact, Hayley and I have just been recording a new course, Confident Public Speaking, it's going to be called. And actually, we did a whole section on vulnerability. And I think the challenge always is, and I don't know if you find this, but it's getting that fine balance between not oversharing, but sharing enough so that you're being authentic. How do you walk that tightrope?
Very interesting question, difficult question. And I think it's more about comfort. You need to feel kind of comfortable saying it, but I think an element of fear is okay. But I think you don't want to make the audience uncomfortable, and I think it's one of those things that you kind of have to judge it by experience and judging the response of the audience. I think only with speaking now to over 8,500 people that I've been better at learning to judge the kind of response, judge what they're feeling a bit more. And I think I've kind of said things sometimes in the past that I've realised actually that kind of got a bit awkward kind of atmosphere in the room.
Yeah, and you can feel it, can't you? Then
absolutely. And I think there's some things I wouldn't go into the very, very depths of mental health, because I think it could be upsetting for people as well. But I think it's just say things that they don't expect. But as a general rule, it's just something that scares you, but not too much, if that's of any help, basically.
Yeah. No, that's a good answer. It's a really good answer. There's a lot to be said for being perceptive on the day, in that moment when you're stood on stage, and actually reading the body language and the facial expressions of the people in front of you. And you're right, a lot of it does come down to experience, though, trial and error with some content. But reading the reaction on the day is a great way to do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
What would be some of the things that you found discouraging as you've tried to build this career? Have you faced challenges along the way? Massively,
and it goes back to having a stammer, which kind of comes and goes when it likes. It's a bit like a wasp, really. Just kind of has no purpose. And again, I'll just add in there that another tip really is just to do that. It's to kind of self-depreciate, because I think people can really connect to that if speakers kind of almost make fun of themselves in a kind of a positive way.
Definitely, it brings such a lovely element of humour as well that audiences find very warm.
It is, and there's a brilliant speaker called Nick. I can't pronounce his surname. Nick Vujicic. Well, it begins with a V, and he was born with no arms and legs.
Oh, I know the chap you mean. Yeah. And
his surname is Vujicic, I think. I remember watching one of his talks, and he can be seen as so unfortunate because of his condition, but he's the most optimistic, self-depreciating, hilarious speakers I've ever seen for that reason.
Yeah.
And so back to my stammer with the challenges with that is that for a long time I had very little control over it. And although I found speaking to 200, 300 people, which would be kind of an average audience for me, was quite easy, perhaps because I haven't got that kind of close personal interaction. Sometimes I'd have bad days and good days, and there would be the odd talk when I had a nightmare, when I was just stammer block after block after block, and those were the ones that I'd come home thinking I hated my job, I hated it, why am I doing this? And the only thing that kind of kept me doing it through those was the feedback I got. I could have a horrendous talk and feel like a complete, just feel like a complete loser, which is the wrong attitude towards any disability. But it was the feedback I got from people saying how much I inspired them and how much they take it from it. And that this really ranges from having people buying me flowers to donating, £500 on the spot to a charity, to bursting into tears, to hugging me, to emailing me, to everything. And that's why I kept on doing it. But after Everest 2015, I was getting into a lot more paid work then, and it was a really good combination because it's something that was kind of flexible. While I was away, obviously, I didn't take on any work, and it meant that at home some weeks I could have free talks, some weeks I had nothing. It was a really good system. But after Everest, because of what happened with the avalanche, I mean, we were stuck up there on the mountain for 2 days. Sadly, 3 of our team died at base camp in the avalanche, and we ourselves were hit by a powder avalanche. And luckily, I mean, we were pretty much unscathed. Had we not left base camp, 5 hours earlier that day, then I wouldn't be speaking to you right now, and that's that's undoubted. It was obviously a pretty traumatic experience at 19 to go through, and the outdoors for me, it's not been it's not a family thing. It's just been something that I've taken on, and so it wasn't like anybody could really understand it. And I got home having seen, death and destruction, and feeling like, kind of, why was I spared? And getting back to speaking that summer was just horrendous. I mean, every talk, it was just, I couldn't speak because my stammer was just so het up. And I think it was the rawness, the kind of emotion of the trauma.
Yeah.
And it got to the point that I was so fed up of just kind of messing up as I saw it, that I had about 4 or 5 talks. There was somewhere I literally had to just sit down and try again. That I very nearly binned it. I really very nearly just kind of cancelled my bookings. There was one booking I had to speak for the FA to 100 young footballers, and again that would be typically quite a challenge. I find it very hard speaking to people my own age sometimes, because I almost feel like they're kind of judging me quite a lot more than adults would.
Yeah.
And it was a challenging one, and I was on the borderline of sending a sick note. I actually had the sick note drafted in my inbox, and I thought, no, I don't quit. I don't back away from adversity. And I went there, and within the first 5 minutes, within the first line, it was a major block. I thought, oh, not again. And I had 100 people just staring at me. You could hear a pin drop. And I just had this surge of energy from somewhere, this last push, and I ended up absolutely nailing it, every word, and had the biggest response, the biggest applause I've probably ever had from an audience. And it's one of those special talks where you just absolutely give it everything you've got. And that talk turned everything around. That saved my career, because from then on it changed. And I went on a speaking course last year or the year before, can't remember now, which taught me techniques to improve my stammer. So I have a lot more control. So much so that almost the fear element has almost gone from my speaking, which in itself is a challenge, because as we know, you need a bit of fear to give you that edge. And so I guess since then, my challenge now has been, I've been doing so much speaking, is keeping it fresh, keeping the same energy. And I think that now is my current biggest challenge, is trying to keep it fresh when I'm speaking so much. Doing new challenges helps, because you have more to talk about, you have more excitement for it. There's so many challenges, there really is. I think another one is the fact is, because I'm young, I often get this response of, why don't I have a real job? Why don't I have a proper job? And I think a lot of speakers will have that. We just have to shake that off.
Yeah.
But on the whole, like any job, it has its challenges, but it's the most rewarding thing I could possibly be doing.
Great answer. And that you've really fought back, and it sounds like you're really in control of your voice and where you're heading with your career. So as you start out in 2018, what do you hope to achieve this year with your speaking work? I mean, have you got a set number of engagements you're aiming for, or is there a new expedition that's kind of dominating the landscape instead?
I think less is more, and I think I'm almost trying to do less engagements, just because I find it a challenge, to keep things fresh. And also, I think, as we know, it takes up a lot of time and energy speaking. And so I've got 17 bookings for the year already, which isn't a bad start.
That's
to 2018. Next week, I'm speaking actually in at St James's Palace as a gold presenter for the Duke of Edinburgh Award, which is probably one of the most high-profile events I've had. So there's lots of opportunities, lots of surprises. It's a really exciting year ahead. But in general, I'm working on my next book. So my first book, Icefall, is all about my journey of speaking and Everest up until the end of my second attempt. But now I'm writing a book about my last challenge around the ups and downs of life, the challenges of mental health. Will be out. Well, that's the challenge, is I need to get that done because I need it out soon. So basically, with writing, I'm doing Manchester Marathon in April, which is kind of a smaller challenge just to keep my drive for challenge and fitness going whilst I'm working on the book, and obviously speaking in between. So basically, probably writing, speaking, running in that order, and then I'll be looking to find another challenge later in the year. But no, the year started really well, and I look forward to seeing what else it brings.
Well, it sounds like you've got a cracking year lined up. And really, what's really great, Alex, about you is that you have this big charity fundraising side as well, which, you're giving back. It's not take, which is, it was wise beyond your years. So we feel confident that you're going to have a stunning 2018. Now, I'm sure people are going to be really piqued their interest about how they can follow what you do. And so where are the best places people can find you online?
Yeah, I really hope so. Anyway, my website would be a good place to start. I have my blogs, links to my book on there. Icefall obviously goes into a lot more detail around the highs and lows of my speaking career, and so that's available on my website. I'm also very active on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Again, there's links to those on my website, which is just my name, alexstaniforth.com. And again, if anybody wants to, does want to speak more or get in touch and ask me anything at all, please feel free. Again, my email is on my website or social media. I guess with my age, social media is very much kind of in my thing. So I'm always on, I'm always on there. So please do follow my journey. There's plenty more to come. As you said, and so it'd be really nice to connect people and just to share the journey with as many as possible, really.
Fantastic. Well, we will make sure that we put the links to everything you've mentioned there in the show notes so people can get directly to you in case they're unsure about the spelling. And we just thank you so much for sharing your journey, and excited for you about what the future holds. It's I think you're going to have a very long speaking career, Alex. It's going to be good.
Yeah, thank you. I hope so. It's a very fortunate position, and it's great to, it's great to be able to do what I do, and and just to share what I've learned, and hopefully inspire as many people as possible. So really looking forward, for the year ahead and beyond, really.
Well, I know there'll be many more people who have been inspired by you. So thanks again.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.